Welcome to another Loving Nights Peace Book Club podcast. We are absolutely delighted that you are joining us tonight. And tonight we are going to be a group of 4 instead of a group of 5. So tonight we have myself, Noelle, Teresa, Ashlyn, and we're missing Jenna, who is off traveling foreign countries far and wide. Welcome, everyone. Tonight we are discussing the book, A Year to Live, How to Live This Year as If It Were Your Last. So welcome, everyone. Do we have any updates from the group? Do we have any news to share before we get started? Anything wonderful been happening in your lives or not so wonderful happening in your lives?
Well, other than enjoying summer, golfing, all that good stuff, it's been great.
Yeah.
That's my update.
I had a great visit to California with my kids and my granddaughter. And then last week, my bonus daughter was here for the week. And then my sister coming up. So it's been a nice summer of visiting with family.
Oh, that's great.
I have had a very interesting month with some very unique challenges that have come up. It seems to be a theme as I pursue this dating avenue of finding my great love, and that could be its own podcast, honestly. Enough stories for days. Shout out to all the girlies out there trying to put their best foot forward in the dating world with some of the men that are out there right now, but I know there's a lot of great ones out there too, so I'm definitely holding space for that. But at the end of the day, I think that what I'm trying to impart from my last month update is just that when you're going through the hard stuff, there's so much good that can come out on the other side. And just wanted to encourage again to ask the whys, to lean into the maybes, to get to your something more. Because truly, through the process of asking why and leaning into the maybes, I know that I'm closer to getting to my something more, which is that great love, which is that relationship that I so dearly hold and desire in my heart and know that I can have. And I did some healing work on spiritual energy work with Tracy. I actually did 2 sessions with her because of the 1-2 punch this month. And I do want to say one other thing, just because it's on my heart. If anyone is listening, at the end of my session with Tracy, again, leaning into those maybes, I cleared past life stuff, which we've talked about on this podcast. We cleared this curse that was a really big deal that was deeply hidden in my soul. And if I didn't have this 1-2 punch, we wouldn't have gotten to some of these things, because I would have just kind of scuffed it off as oh, this is just the way it is, and instead I was like, whoa, okay, this really devastated me for a second. We need to look deeper. And what I'm trying to impart, getting to my point here, is that at the very end, I said, what is it that I need to do to hold space to attract this great love? And the message that came through was truly to just love myself as deeply and fully and vibrantly as I possibly could. And I think that that's a message for anyone and everyone. It begins with you. So there you have it.
I was going to say, doesn't that kind of tie in with how to live this year as if it were your last? Maybe it's every day living in that love of self. Truly.
Yeah.
And our last month's book, I mean, we talked about, girls to women, essentially. And what we're talking about now is a situation where we have grown men, acting like boys, really making decisions that are very immature because they're so wounded themselves. They don't know how to stand up and truly be a man.
It's kind of funny because I am pretty intentional when I've been sharing this story, not to be denigrative to them, but I've been calling them boys. I'm like, this is what boys do. These 2 boys, one of them was 38 and one of them was 30, but I was like, these boys, So to your point, Mom, it's boys. So I have a lot of compassion for them, and I wish them nothing but the best.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it doesn't feel great.
It's truly their wounding that is really preventing them from being the man, the person that they probably truly want to be, that they know they can be.
Totally. So, well, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and read the quick summary of the book. Wait, Mom, did you have any updates?
Did I have any updates? It was kind of funny today. I was in the dentist office today, and many of you know I've had, my gosh, 20 years of dental issues. And I was in the very last room of the dental office, and I walked in and I thought, isn't this a great metaphor? Because today I have reached the final treatment, the end of the road, and here I am in the last office. So I thought it was like a very good metaphor. And it, I have to say, my dental issues and my teeth have been it may sound crazy, but it's been some of my greatest teachers. Truly, like digging into all of these issues that have gone on with my mouth has really allowed me to understand myself better and the things that I've brought into this lifetime that need healed.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm happy for you. This is a big day. I'm very excited for you.
Yeah,
Yay.
me too. Too. Thank you. Take it away, Ashlyn.
All right, I am going to go ahead and read the quick summary of the book. So here we go. And again, this book was A Year to Live, How to Live This Year as If It Were Your Last. On his deathbed, Socrates exhorted his followers to practice dying as the highest form of wisdom. Author Stephen Levine took this to heart and decided to live this way himself for a whole year. And now he shares with you how such immediacy radically changes your view of the world and forces you to examine your priorities. He offers teachings to help you live each moment, each hour, each day mindfully, as if it were your last. Living each day as if it were your last gives you the opportunity to deal with unfinished business and enter into a new, vibrant relationship with life. At the end of the book, Levine offers the guidelines for creating your own A Year to Live experience. So, ladies, what did you think the most important takeaway was from the book? Did you enjoy it?
All right, I'll go first. I don't very often go first, but I'll go first tonight. I actually think the most important takeaway from this book is that you have to look to the past and clear what has happened in the past to create your future. And so when you go through this process of living your life as if it's your last year, it's really this process of deep self-awareness of where have I been and where do I want to go. And I think that's just such a profound way to live your life when you take the time to look at where you've been, whether it's like, what's going on with your relationships, what's going on with your physical body, what are these things there to show you and to teach you so that you don't have to keep repeating the same patterns over and over, and you ultimately can become the person that you truly want to become with the life that you want to lead.
Something for me that reading at this thought came in. So often we get books like this at different stages of our life. I mean, look at the different ages we are. We maybe have already or are in a relationship, a marriage. You've already started intertwining and building, or you've separated and divorced and trying to unwind and become an individual again. I kind of thought this is something almost like a free handbook tool to do as a younger person, maybe college, or I'm not sure quite when the time would be, but while we're not entwined with someone, to really do it on our own, find out all those issues and cores and build and planning and understanding, come out on the other side, and here we are for our friends, or a loved one that we may meet or something, versus, here I am reading it at my age. I don't know. It was just a thought. Why not start earlier?
I wonder, Teresa, that's the thing about this. Like, are you motivated at 25 to take a year and try to live this way? Are you motivated if you don't have an impetus or something pushing you? That's the question that everyone, I think, has to answer.
And I guess everybody has it. Or, you get to a certain age, and I hear a lot of people younger than me is like, oh, they've kind of already given up. They're like, this is how it's going to be. So they would have no interest because they already think life is what it is. Mm-hmm. So, it could go either way, young or old. I just think it would be young people that are on a journey of awareness. This would be a good book to get as early as possible.
I actually thought it was really about the preciousness of life and the idea of living your year, or living a year like it's the last one here. It's not the physical body, it's the experiences and how you grow as a human being. You know, you grow through the gifts of relationship and being able to look back on those. I feel like you'd have to have enough experience to be able to look back, to be able to see the gifts within those. When we get to one of my favorite parts, I'll talk more about that. But it's really that ability to live in the moment without controlling it and really seeing the preciousness of that. So I actually really enjoyed that reminder. It's something that you hear, but this book made you really pause and think about different ways to access that in your life. So
Well, to kind of tag off of that, though, which it's a great book, Live Like You're Dying. Tim McGraw wrote a beautiful song years ago. That probably impacted me even more than this book. It makes me think all the time. But why do we have to live like we're dying in order to appreciate? And I guess that was my point of learning and doing this book or anything like it early on. It is a gift to be able, even as an infant, to look up at a baby looks up at mama or daddy, and there's joy and gratitude and love. Isn't that something that we should be doing every day and not have to live like we're dying? Just a thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, what I would say to that is I couldn't agree more to live life in the fullest. I was so excited to read this book because I really thought that's what it was going to be about. But honestly, this book kind of missed me. I'm not going to lie, because I wanted to hear about A Year to Live. Go freaking live. And I think in hindsight, reading the synopsis, I should have been more aware of what this book was about. But I really felt like it was about dying, like what to do. You have a year left. What do you do before you die? And it wasn't like go, do the Tim McGraw song. It was more like, let's review your life. Let's make things right. Let's forgive. Let's be mindful. Let's find gratitude. Now, to that point, back to Teresa, we should be doing that from the beginning. Wouldn't it be beautiful if from a young age we were being mindful, we were being grateful, we were practicing forgiveness, we were learning instead of holding grudges? And that, to the other part of this question, was my takeaway. Like, live intentionally, live with intention. How are you speaking? Are you responding, not reacting? Are you learning, not blaming? Are you living in gratitude and forgiveness? Those key components were probably my biggest takeaway from this book. But I'm gonna say I did not really like the book. And I could not wait for it to be over. I was like, okay. And really, one more quick thing to that, being in my 20s, like, not that I know dying is a thing, but I'm like, I'm not thinking about doing my life review right now.
I listened to it first. Did anybody else listen to it? Because I first started listening to it and reading the book at the same time, but there are large chunks in the book that aren't in the audio version of it. And then, so that one, like, there weren't the little stories in between where he would talk about what he learned or that as a client or someone. None of that was in the book. It was very interesting. So I had to then go back and kind of peruse.
That's fascinating, Noelle, that there was a difference between the audiobook and the actual written book.
Right. And the audio was only 3 hours and something long, which tells you something.
Wow.
Yeah. Not that the book is terribly long, but right.
Maybe I didn't like the book because I didn't actually read the book. Plot twist.
So did you also listen?
I listened to the audiobook, the full audiobook. I had no idea.
Right. And I feel like there was a lot missing that's in the book. But I still think, like you said, Ashlyn, I still think the focus was more on, like, if this is your last year, let's do all the things. I mean, we'll probably get to this. I know we'll get to in a question, but, almost like it is your near-death experience life review is kind of where that went with that. And I felt like the nuggets of gratitude and letting go and things like that were just like, I don't want to say glossed over, but kind of glossed over compared to that kind of life review piece. But
yeah, that's so fascinating. Ashlyn and I were discussing the questions, and she's like, I don't remember hearing about that. So
Yeah, and I'm like, did I miss something? Like, so there are some things that maybe was not featured in the audiobook, but either way, I mean, yeah, I still think in summary, it was still mostly about what you do before you die. Even at the end, part of the premise of this is this man and his wife spent the whole year doing this practice. Like, what if this was the last year? Because they have walked people through this in hospice and worked with patients like that over their lives. And I mean, they even did the energy work, breath work at the end, right? Like of how do you transition out of your body. At this spot where I'm at, that's, I mean, maybe good to, like, if you're going through something or you're getting close, this actually I think would be an incredible book to read. And to their point, you never know when it's your last day. But I mean, that also just missed me, right? I'm like, I don't need to hear right now about how you do your energy breath to leave your body at this time, although illuminating that you can do that. But yeah.
Well, I think it kind of goes back a little bit to Teresa's point again, which is what if we actually taught our children how to live this way and process life? Noelle does.
I teach that small group of kids that I interact with, but I do think that will start growing and gaining momentum pretty soon.
Yeah.
Well, and I totally agree. I just don't think the way this book was written did it sound like that. It wasn't like, here are the 5 ways to like live your life, like the Tim McGraw song. It was more like things are coming to an end, be mindful, find forgiveness, be intentional. I liked it, but it just didn't, the way it was presented, the way it was not, it didn't resonate in its presentation, I guess.
But isn't it interesting if you go back and all the books, just to take the books we've read in this podcast over the last couple of years, they all are a message of showing up, being authentic, being mindful. How do we forgive? Communicating. It's something, those of us that have children, we teach that as infants growing up. I was a Girl Scout leader, a Boy Scout. Like it's a fundamental, no matter how old. It's something. Who are you today? Where do we want to be? I just found it like a handbook. I have a year and I'm dying, and that could happen to me at any age. We should be forgiving and communicating and loving every single day, not just the last year of your life. That's just where I was.
I had an experience when I was in my early 30s where I had a mole that was precancerous. Well, I had a mole that they removed that they didn't know the situation was. And we had just had a friend die of melanoma, and I had 2 young children. And I called a week later. Well, the results were inconclusive. We sent it for retest. I was 2.5 weeks at 30-some years old, 2 little kids, thinking I'm going to die. And I was at a different place in my life then than I am now, obviously, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of those things. But it was such an interesting 2 weeks of my life because just the thought of not being here made me live. And I really think that was one of the big points of this book is when you live like you're dying, you're actually really embracing life and living. I am telling you, the world was beautiful. I mean, you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to live without this beauty? How am I going to live without these incredible, precious children? You know, there were just all these things that came to life that when I was just like going through the motions of life were kind of, I mean, you know, they were great, but all of a sudden they had a vibrancy to them that they had never had before when I didn't know if I was going to live.
That's a real experience.
I was fine, by the way. Here I am. But
this kind of leads into our next question, which was on page 11, it was clear that though I was experiencing the fear of death, it was the fear of life that needed to be investigated first. What did you think of the idea that as humans, we are afraid of life?
Oh, I totally agree that I think most people, you guys, we know a lot of people, just us 4 right here in our sphere know a lot of people. I'd say a good 85% live in fear, in doubt, fear, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt. They might not be aware of it.
Right. I think that people, we come here forgetting, and so they don't know their purpose. And so I think they're afraid. People are afraid of making mistakes, afraid of people not liking them, afraid of hurting others or other people hurting them. All those questions, will I be liked? And so they live in this kind of fear-based way. So they're afraid to live or maybe they don't even know the truth of who they are. So they're this fear of like, what is the real purpose here? And then we have the dogma of religion or things that, you're going to be, what's it called? The judgment day. There we go. There's going to be that day at the end of your life where you're judged. So you're afraid of living because what's the ramification of this decision and this decision? So a lot of people are just hold tight to nothing.
Those are old paradigms, old ways of thinking, and generations have been trained from infants to be afraid.
Right.
We've been taught that. So it's just a process of maybe the living as you're dying is to be untaught. Maybe it's just as reword it, I guess, and unlearn what we've learned. We talk about that all the time, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're a listener, look at your own life in this moment. How are you hiding from putting yourself out there in the world? Or how are you not doing what you really want to do because you're afraid that if you leave this amazing job, you're not going to have enough money to do what you need to do? And, how many times, even in my own life, when I look back, how many times did I make a decision based on fear versus based on how I truly wanted to live my life? I mean, if I only had 1 year to live, would I stay in that terrible job that I hate every single day that felt like pushing a boulder up a hill? You bet I would not.
Nope.
Why do we
live one day in a job that we hate, that people are treated? I just talked to somebody 2 days ago. What is going on in their corporate experiences? I don't know that I would want to be around those kind of people for 10 minutes.
How long do we stay in a toxic relationship that really is sucking the life out of us because we're afraid to leave or we're afraid to cut ties? So I thought it was a valid point that he made in the book. What are your thoughts on that, Ashlyn?
I think it's so clear that, the only thing more powerful than fear is love. But love is a tricky thing for some, and fear is a very powerful emotion. So I do think that we as humans are often afraid of life. And I think to partly Noelle's point earlier, how you live life can determine your afterlife in many people's belief systems. So there's got to be a way that you have to be afraid you're behaving here and now, because you could end up on Judgment Day, you could end up in hell if you're living life incorrectly. So I think innately, sometimes certain organized religions will definitely create fear of how we're living. And then I think that it is the fear of, the distinction that was made in the book was between fear of death and fear of dying. And so I think that there are those layers of people being afraid to live because they're afraid of dying, and they're also afraid of death. So I think both of those hold true. And yeah, I mean, I do think many humans are afraid of life. And part of the other fear, not to tie it back into my original story, but that we kicked this podcast off, but the human experience is full of a lot of complex emotions, and it can be full of a lot of pain. And I think that the fear of that pain is also what keeps us from living, because one of the questions I was asking myself when I had my 1-2 punch of heartbreak, I was like, okay, how do people keep doing this? How do you keep opening your heart? And again, we're resilient and we heal and we have the tools, but it is something that I think makes us afraid to live, is to feel and to feel that pain. And he talked in this book about the importance of stopping and sitting with your feelings. And really then applying the Love Ignites Peace formula of asking the whys, lean into the maybes, get to that something more.
I want to add on really quickly, just because I was thinking about this with this question, is that people forget, or people don't know, or they forget, or they're not to the point yet where they realize that it is an inside job. It's not what you do out here, it's what you do in here. And so, and I think that once that aha goes off for human beings, they're like, they're not so, I mean, there's still some of that seated fear, but I think they're more willing to risk when they know it's really, I'm okay no matter what happens out there.
And I would also personally say that my faith has helped me be more safe to live. I feel less fear in some of the conversations we've had, right? We did a whole series like Peter Panagore about his near-death experience and what it was like to meet God and what it was like to die. Angels in My Hair by Lorna Brine, right? Like we have this beautiful workforce of divine protection just waiting for us to call upon them to help our lives be easier and safer and healthier and happier. Like my faith system helps me be more comfortable to live. And I hope that anyone listening, your belief system is making you feel more comfortable to live. And if it's not, then you have some investigating to do, because I don't personally believe that's how we're supposed to live. And fear is not how we're supposed to live.
Well, let's move on to the next question. I'm wondering, Noelle, if this was your favorite part of the book, because you said, we'll dig into my favorite part of the book here shortly. So I'm curious about what that is. But the author talked about the life review while you were still alive. It did make me think about our book discussion with Peter Panagore, which Ashlyn just mentioned a second ago, who was a 2-time near-death experiencer. And he went through a life review when his soul, if you will, crossed over to the other side. What do you think about the idea of doing this life review when you're alive? And what did you think of the author's process for it?
Well, I will start because I love that part. That was my favorite part of the book. Just because, I mean, I've experienced this myself where I look back at something that was, I mean, his process is really starting with those, you're looking at your pleasant experiences, interacting with the people just in your own process, the people that you experience those pleasant kind of experiences with, having conversations with them, sharing the memory, thanking them, this kind of whole process. And then you're also looking at the unpleasant memories and even the neutral memories. And so what I like about this is it allows you to see the golden thread that weaves throughout all of these, where you get these beautiful experiences that if this didn't happen, it wouldn't have led to this. And so when you're looking at a life review, you can even look at your most challenging. And I know some things are incredibly challenging. People have experienced some really awful things that have occurred in their lifetime. But ideally, you can look back at them and look for the golden thread, something beautiful that came out of it, or see how from that point, how you grew as a human being, and maybe that opened you up to a new way of thinking or opened up a new way to love yourself. And then being able to use that gratitude for what you find, forgiveness where necessary and where you can. Ideally, you can say, thank you for playing that part in the play of my life to help me be this person, even if, you know, you never ever would step foot in a room with that person. But that forgiveness piece was really important. And also that repaying debts, kind of that making amends where necessary for yourself. And then just finding the gifts in all the relationships that may be in your life. So that's kind of how I viewed that whole process. And I thought it was pretty beautiful and life-changing.
Well, if no one's going to jump in, I'll jump in. I thought it was my favorite part of the book too, Noelle. And we all here have kind of done this idea of a life review over and over, but it was so fascinating to me. You know, I started this and the first section was like gratitude, and I actually made a list. I took probably 45 minutes and just made a list of every single person in my life that I felt like had touched my life and I was grateful for. And I cannot tell you the energy that gave me, just like for the rest of my day and even days to come, like reflecting back on that and on those pieces. And even when we got to the forgiveness part of the life review, I thought it was a really great story where he knew that he needed to forgive himself and he needed forgiveness from someone else that he didn't think he had treated so nicely. And he put that person's picture, a picture of them on his altar, and, really just called in that that forgiveness with that person. And that really struck me. And again, I actually had a list of one or two people that I thought, my goodness, I probably wasn't the nicest to that person, and I really need to ask that person for forgiveness. So if you're one of those two people out there in my life, I am sorry. I did not intend to hurt you, and I offer you, I guess, an apology for how I treated you. So I thought that was great. And I think the life review process is part of this process of peeling back the fears, what you're afraid of too, and when you hang on to all those things, that's really part of what you're afraid of. You're afraid to let go of what has hurt you in the past, because there's something even in that pain that's keeping you safe.
I love what you just said about the altar. That one struck me as well. That was probably one of my number one takeaways that I had never considered. The rest, I think, are things that we really all talked about before. But that, I was like, okay, I kind of like that idea. So definitely agree with that. I just think the life review, looking at some of my notes here, I really liked that it was a focused reflection and a regathering of awareness to illuminate the past. And it did call you to experience a full range of emotion, forgiveness and gratitude, mindfulness and mercy. And that also helps you see your blessings. So I liked it. I definitely think it was the most powerful part of the book, but I don't know, it still didn't fully compel me forward. But I thought it was a beautiful thought. If we get the privilege to do so, I think that's great.
I think too, sometimes we read these books, and we've talked about this before, where we've done a lot of this work, so it's not brand new to us. So maybe it's not as oh, woo woo, or foofy, but I think that some people may not have realized that you can actually look for something beautiful that came out of something challenging. And so I think for the right person, that reminder, or maybe it will be the first time they ever hear this, how powerful it is.
Well, I think we all did the life review part, and obviously it was all four of us, our most impactful part of the book. But I'm still going to go back with, New Year's Eve. Everybody does a resolution. And don't we kind of look back on our year of review, or our birthday? I have a birthday coming up. So again, I know a lot of people look back this last year. What have I done? Where have I been? Who have I seen? What do I say? Who, what, where, when, what? It's a review. And I think if we're mindful, and maybe for me, that's the biggest message. Be mindful now. Whatever age you are, you don't have to wait for this, mole or heart attack or, a blood clot that I had last week. We're probably always doing reviews. We're just not maybe always mindful of it. And that would be my biggest takeaway for anybody reading or living your life. Just review the day, review the week, review the month. Be mindful. And what's your intent?
That is really actually an interesting way to look at this, that you could apply the life in review to your daily practice, to your weekly practice, to your New Year's practice. I probably wouldn't recommend this book to anyone except someone that was potentially passing on and were ill, or they knew something was coming, they were older or something like that. But now that you say that, I'm like, wait, actually this process could apply at any time. Why not do it for your week and your day? And I think you would live a more heart-centered life, right? You're focusing on forgiveness, you're feeling the feelings, you're feeling gratitude, you're counting your blessings. I'm just going through some of the things here on what that review was. I mean, what a way to start and end your day, or what a way to be mindful in life all the time. I think that's a great point.
I also think it is very similar. Actually, this whole book is very similar to a 12-step program. And the 12-step programs are for lots of different people. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the person that he was interviewing was saying that 12-step programs are often the gateway for people to step into a spiritual life. And so I feel like there's this parallel to this. It's not even just the life review, it's all these other pieces are built within those 12-step programs. So I think more and more people are going to hear about this, and it'll become more of a way of life where we do this big life review, but just like Teresa and Ashley both said, we are constant. We do this already, where we're kind of reviewing our day, like, oh, I could have handled that differently, or I need to apologize to so and so, or make amends, or why did that bother me so much? That maybe something someone else did. Oh, why did that really bother me so much? So we're constantly kind of unpacking our reviews on a regular basis.
Lighten the load. We don't have to keep carrying everything until our last breath. I think it's a work in action daily. That for me is that's what this book did, kind of validate, but also be mindful to do it every day. Don't wait. Just don't wait. Don't keep putting things off.
On the flip side of that, I want to say what's encouraging about this is it's not too late. It's never too late to make amends, to find healing, to find the blessings and the hard things, the lessons. That I think was such a powerful message that really some people could benefit from in this book. I'm pretty excited about the next question. Did you have something you wanted to say, Mom?
I was just going to say, what if you really lived your life like that every single day? I mean, life would take on an incredible vibrancy that it just didn't before.
So I'm excited to ask my favorite question on this book club podcast for today. And it is, if you only had 1 year to live, what would you change about your current life?
Me personally, probably not a whole lot. I really, truly, deeply love my life. I feel honored to be here in this moment, in our time, to good, bad, or ugly, to have the experiences. And I think it's an honor, and I'm very grateful. I love my life.
I knew you were going to answer that way, Teresa. And I love that. I love it.
One of my favorite things, and I've been saying it maybe for about 18 years, and I mean it from the depths of my soul. I only know you how I know you now. I will never have the opportunity to know the people and the experiences of this life again. Believe in reincarnation, that's great, but it won't be my memory of me now knowing you, Paige, or you, Noelle, or you, Ashlyn, or my children, or my business partner, Valerie. I know it now, and it means so much, and I am just over the moon happy.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
So I wouldn't change a thing.
I love it.
Well, I also would not change a thing. Kind of like my answers of what would you tell your younger self? Same thing. Like, I love my life. I love all the people in it, even those ones that maybe bring up some of those not so pleasant emotions. But I really am starting this practice of really saying, thank you for playing that part in my life that you agreed to play to help me grow as a human being. So I love that. And if it really, really, really were the last year of my life, I would move where my kids are. I know they're not going to be there for much longer, but if it were really the last year of my life, I would move there. If it were truly the last year. If it is not the last year of my life, they're not going to be there very much longer. So it would be silly to move there and then have to move a year later. But if it were truly the last year of my life, I would move to be near my kids. That's the only change I would make.
Well, Ashlyn, I am dying to hear from you since this was your favorite question.
I just thought it was a fun question, and I was excited to hear what everyone had to say. And I'm not surprised. I would have bet my left toe. That's what Teresa said, and I love that because you do love your life. And I think it's so beautiful. And I mean, I really think my mom's going to have the same answer. So I'm curious to hear what she says. And Noelle, I think yours was so beautiful and so on point. I think so many people would resonate with that as well. Mine is not going to be of any shock to you all. I want that Sunday morning kind of love. You know what I mean? Like I want that, like that Sunday kind of love where you have that soul love and that peaceful, like living life. I haven't done that with someone. Like you guys have all done that with a guy. And I haven't had that opportunity yet to really like, I don't know, enjoy that side of life. And I think that there's a lot of things that come with that. It's not the end all be all. I think that there's so much more to life than just that person. And I know that I talk about it a lot because it's the area in which I am experiencing growth and evolution, and my journey is in that spot. But otherwise, I would also agree in the fact that I truly do feel like I live my life in a way that I absolutely adore and I love. I'm if it really was my last year, and this book did not say this was not advice from the book, but I would spend every possible moment with the people I love, and I would spend a lot of time in nature. Like I would want to see and just be in the magnificence and the beauty of the world more. And maybe that's something I should integrate. One thing I have thought about doing is like a sunset counter, like making a goal of how many sunsets I can see in a year or something like that, because I am at that kind of, I mean, everyone on this phone call or on this book club is still hustling and grinding. So it's not that, I guess, but sometimes I work late and I don't get out of the house to go look at the sunset, and I don't take advantage of some of those things where, although I love what I'm doing, if it was my last year to live, I'd be like, this is so great, but like, I'm going to go look at the sunset. So maybe that's just a good reminder to be more mindful of those moments. Mom, what about you?
Well, it is actually funny. I actually made a list because while I was reading this, and I too love my life. And really, as I was thinking about it, I was thinking like, it's just like turning a dial of fine tuning it. And how do I want to live my life now as if truly this is the last year of my life? And what's funny is some of those crossover with Ashland's, and we never even talked about it. So the first one on my list was spend more time with the people I love. Really cultivate quality time, and then I include family and friends in that list. And really, I've created this for the month of July. I mean, every weekend I am spending time with family and friends in the month of July, and I am so blessed to say that I'm making that happen. Spending time in nature and really seeing and absorbing the beauty around me. Because I think so often I'm outside and I'm in nature and I see it, but I don't really see it and absorb it and like feel that beauty in the depth of my being. And so I would really want to do that. I struggle with being in the present moment. It is something that is, one of my still evolving into things. And I would like to really focus as much as I can on being present, not living in the past, not living in the future. I want to let go of any remaining limitations if this is my last year of life. And I certainly want to let go of what people think about me and what I'm doing, so I can live just as completely in this idea of freedom. Like, what is life calling me to do? And my heart, because I am free and unafraid, is going to answer whatever that call is.
That's a great list. See, I love that you actually took the time to sit and think about those things, like list it out. I think that would actually have been a really good practice. Maybe that was suggested in the book, but it was not suggested in the audiobook. So if I missed that exercise, but I will say it's so funny, my task-oriented mama, sometimes not able to be in the present enjoying. So I think it's so fun that you added that one. But I think you're doing a great job at embodying all those. One thing I really quickly was thinking about that I thought was kind of profound, that he was saying that he's also worked with people. The author was saying he's worked with people at the end of their lives where one of their greatest disappointments or fears was that they were not enlightened yet. And he's like, isn't that kind of the point, that you've missed enlightenment? And although my mom was saying the limitations, right? Like, how many limitations can I remove? I think that's beautiful. That's different than being like, okay, and then I better make sure I'm enlightened in the next 60 days. Like, here we go. So I thought that was just kind of a funny little side note that tickled me, because I could totally see some people well-meaning and also some of the asses of enlightenment that we have talked about feeling that way. So I think we're ready for the next question. What do you guys think?
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question, really content related versus the rating and recommendation. If you could impart one bit of wisdom from this book to our listeners to use in their daily lives, what would that wisdom be?
For me, he equated dying to letting go. And I really think that that is a huge piece of wisdom in this book is every day let go and allow.
For me, I think I kind of even started the discussion tonight and it's carried through. It's just every day. We can call it mindfulness. We can call it appreciation. We can call it gratitude. We can call it being honored to be alive. But just see, really just see the person next to you. Hear what they're saying. Feel the energy around you. Just be wholly present. Don't be on the phone while you're talking to somebody or the TV on while you're having dinner with the family. Just be wholly present. It makes a huge difference.
And my takeaway or my biggest bit of wisdom is to live your life consciously, which is kind of what both of you are saying, just a different way to say it. Living your life consciously with an open heart and just loving every aspect, even the tough stuff.
There was something that I thought we could have had a whole big discussion on, and it's on page 71. If anybody out there has the book, says the clarity comes from mindfulness of the changing states of mind. The forgiveness comes from a heart that can no longer stand to be close to itself or anyone else. A heart that values freedom more than it wants to disguise its pain. I think that is magnificent and deep and thoughtful.
It's funny, I had written part of that quote down.
Really?
Yep.
Thought it was beautiful.
Although I completely reiterate what everyone said about the conscious living and the being in the present moment, a nugget that I think is actionable for daily life is he talked about the thee versus my way of talking about things. So don't call it my pain, call it the pain. Don't call it, my cancer, call it the cancer. And he says, when we begin to respond to discomfort instead of reacting to it, an enormous change occurs. We begin to experience it not as our pain, but as the pain, and it becomes accessible to a level of compassion, perhaps previously unknown. And I also think that doing the thee versus my keeps it becoming part of your identity. So if something's occurring, instead of embodying that as like, oh, like my pain, my this, my that, it's the. And thus you can disassociate from it, you can heal it, you can let it go, as my mom said in the letting go. And it's just really, I think, an actionable way to talk about difficult things in a healthy, healing life review, let it go, daily practice.
I love that, Ashlyn. That is 2 thumbs up.
Woo woo.
Mm-hmm.
My thumbs or the thumbs up? Just kidding.
And 2 thumbs up.
I love it. Well, let's review. I mean, would you guys recommend this book? What do you rate it between 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst, or on Darian's scale, who used to be on this podcast, burn it in the ashes?
Oh boy. Here's what Darian would do.
She tosses it right out.
She would throw it across the room. I probably maybe a 2+. It wasn't one of my most favorites.
Teresa, I agree. I said a 3. It wasn't earth-shattering for me, but I could see someone that was ready and hadn't really thought about life in this way. I would think it would be powerful. So I would have to think about who I was recommending it to. But I think overall, I mean, for me, it wasn't anything earth-shattering or anything new. But just like all the books we've read, there are nuggets of wisdom, and for the right person, I would recommend it. So I gave it a 3.
I would also give it a 3. However, I would say I think this book, if you do some of the exercises and some of the things that he suggests, and if you actually spent a month at a time contemplating some of the things that he wanted you to contemplate, I really think it could have life-changing effects for a person. As just a book to pick up and read, I think there's some good nuggets, but I think this book is probably very well spent if you actually spent time with each of the things that he is suggesting for 1 month at a time at the end of the book for a year.
I'm going to give the audiobook a 2 because, as we discussed, there are some things that I perhaps missed in the actual paperback version, which does not usually occur. So it's kind of unique that this happened here, but I'm going to give it a 2. I really, really wanted to get done reading it. I didn't feel like it really fit too much with where I was at. I didn't feel like I learned a ton from it, although there's always good nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to recommend it to someone, it would be someone at the end of their life. I think this book would be really powerful for someone in that situation. I think there is a group of people who could really benefit from knowing that there's time yet to put a bow around their life, and it can be done in a beautiful way that can create peace. So that's who I would recommend it to, but probably not to someone just out here bopping around in their 20s,
Right.
Doing their thing.
It was written in 1997, so that was 27 years ago, sometime in that year. I think that our consciousness as human beings has evolved a little bit in that timeline. And so I think that's maybe why it's not so earth-shattering.
I would agree. Something else I was thinking too, that to just give a shout out to the lady on the last book club podcast, because we were passionate about some of her takes on things too. Shout out to anybody that has the courage to put together, writing a book and sharing their thoughts vulnerably with the world. So I could feel that in myself in listening to this, getting frustrated. I'm like, but this is actually beautiful that they did this. So yeah. But back to your point, Noelle, I agree. I think maybe we've shifted beyond this and more people have a general awareness, so this won't appeal to as many people at this point.
I actually think this book has helped many people over the last, what did you say, Noelle, 27 years, something like that?
Yeah, right.
And how this book came to me was a gentleman that I work that does some of my financial stuff. He told me he is starting a process where they're living 1 year and they're using the book. And that's what inspired me to pick this book as our book club book. So after this, I will touch base with him and see how he's doing on that process, and then report back for our next book club to see what he thinks about that.
It's kind of an interesting avenue to your self-exploration. Like it's almost feels that that's perhaps how they're using the book. Very cool.
Well, our next month book is really a book that Ashlyn wanted us to read, because you know that Ashlyn and Jenna are big Gabby Bernstein fans. So we are going to read Super Attractor by Gabby Bernstein for our August book club book. Ashlyn, do you have any comments on that, since this is one that you were excited to read?
Honestly, I don't know how big of a Gabby Bernstein fan I am in general, but I like her books, especially The Universe Has Your Back. That is low-key of my Bible. One of my Bibles. I love that book so much. Every reread I get more out of it. I like to spend time with it in my mornings and glean something from it. And so I have high hopes for Super Attractor. And I was messaging with a woman who we had been networking with and just creating community, and she had said that she preferred Super Attractor even more than The Universe Has Your Back. So my hopes are high. I hope that is the reality, that it is a real winner like The Universe Has Your Back, because I think we all really enjoyed that one. So hoping to dive deeper with Super Attractor, but I guess we'll see next month what we think.
All right. Well, let's leave this book club podcast with a quote from the book that we read this month. It was on page 125, and it was, "Our karma does not so much create what happens to us as how we deal with it. Karma is our increasing capacity for problem solving on increasingly deepening levels. There is no retribution in karma, just a persistent reminding until we get the teaching to let go of our suffering.
I love that.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us this month. We are thrilled to have you on this journey with us, and we look forward to connecting with you next month. As always, I am sending you love from my heart to yours.
And get your freak on. Have a great rest of your week.